It is bigger. I feel the ground move under my feet. People look around like, what could it be? They point to the towers, they point to the rise, but this shaking in the dirt is a warning in disguise. Not just the walls, not just the stone, it's the way the wicked hangs on a world not their own. He sees the land, he sees the line, he sees the crossing every single time. And when enough is enough, when the mercy grows.
Welcome to the Thought Brothers. I'm your host, Gary Johnson, your moderator, and tonight is a special show. We're going to be talking about caregiving, generational wealth, legacy. We've got special guests, attorney Amy Griffin, who's going to be leading the charge for us. But I want to open up the show. I thought about my personal situation with my family, friends that I know. There are millions of Americans that suddenly find themselves caring for aging parents or spouses or other loved ones suddenly without a plan. And too often, these decisions are made like in a crisis mode. So what I'm trying to do is open up the discussion and see how we can protect families, how families can protect their loved ones, preserve relationships, because I've seen relationships get fractured in families. There's mental health issues, there's generational wealth where people are fighting in court. Now, that's a tall order for a podcast, and it's a heavy lift. But we're going to do our best effort tonight to get it done, because caregiving is more than a healthcare issue. It's a family issue, becomes a legal issue, a financial issue, and ultimately it's a legacy issue. And so I want to open up the show, and I want to just go around. I'll call on you, and then just give us kind of a Reader's Digest, 30 seconds or so for now, of who you are, and then we'll start the show. I'd like to start off with the person that I refer to as Amy Griffin, the lead attorney here. Come on in, Amy. How you doing?
First and foremost, let me thank you for having a conversation, because so often we don't talk about the things that are difficult. And so this is difficult in a multitude of ways, financially, emotionally, our ego, all of those things are tied up. So I thank you for having the boldness to have this conversation. And the quick answer is that I'm an estate planning attorney. And so I'm supporting the creation, protection, and transfer of wealth. And that's what we do all day and all night.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Ralph Roll. Give us your Reader's Digest version.
Ralph Roll. I am a professional musician of nearly 50 years. I'm also a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I started a cookie company 30 years ago called the Soul Snacks Cookie Company when I was living in the Bronx in the public housing, and I built it all the way to Walmart and Kroger. I also developed a platform called Dear Family Stories that preserves the stories in families, pictures, videos, audio, text, because I believe that our family history is generational wealth.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. Linda Woodson.
Hi, my name is Linda Woodson, born and raised in Washington, D.C., moved to Palm Coast, Florida with my husband 27 years ago, worked for Amtrak for 38 years before I retired from there. And I've been a family caregiver for many years with my great aunt, took care of her. My grandmother's first cousin took care of her, a next door neighbor, both of my parents, and now my husband. So my great uncle said I was a great nurse, and my mother called me Nurse Ratchet.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Let's say affectionately Nurse Ratchet.
Affectionately Nurse Ratchet.
Okay. Stan Harrison.
Stan Harrison, State Farm agent here in the great state of Florida. We've expanded our operations to 4 additional states, including North, South Carolina, Georgia, and also most recently Louisiana. So just like Attorney Griffin mentioned, we aim to preserve the wealth and extend that family dynamic for future years to come.
Okay. Eric Garvin.
Eric Garvin, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, lifetime New York Knicks fan. Spent 30 years in the United States Air Force. Now reside in Palm Coast, Florida. And I'm in the process right now of updating my estate plan, my trust, as a result of my son's death. So I am really, really keen on trying to do everything I can to preserve this generational wealth and seeking all the opportunities. So I'm really interested in hearing some of their perspectives tonight.
Okay, thank you. Now we get to our original thought brothers, Mr. Spivey, aka the researcher.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Spivey. I live here in Fort Washington, Maryland. I'm a retired FBI agent, 20 years. I'm originally from the Virginia Beach area, and I think I have a lot to contribute to this caregiver because I went through some really rough times back in the early 90s with my parents.
Okay, thank you. Carlos.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Carlos Perlman. Been here with Thought Brothers since we created the concept of the show the last 4 years. By day, I have a career in financial services. And when I'm not doing the Thought Brothers, I'm working with student athletes at the historic Fairmont Heights High School in Prince George's County, Maryland, trying to help them achieve excellence with academics, athletics, and community service. So I am looking forward to this show tonight because I have a relative who I've had some experiences with as well. So I think this is a very good topic for a lot of people to learn a lot from. So thank you.
Okay, CJ.
My name is CJ. I am one of the Thought Brothers hosts. I don't have any distinguished credentials like everyone else.
Well, you do have credentials, so you're distinguished, and you will by the end of this. You'll realize what your distinguished credentials are by the end of this episode. Before I turn it over to Amy, I thought about something that happened about 3 or 4 years ago. My sister was my mother's caretaker, and my mother was, doing dialysis. But after dialysis, she was still very alert. She was about 90, still very alert, computer savvy. And when I moved from the DC area to Florida, I decided once I got down here, for whatever reason, to get my mother on Zoom and just have some interviews with her. And now, after this show, I'm going to go back and look at those videos because I've got 3 Zoom videos with my mother. I can't even remember what I asked her, but I just know my goal was to just ask her and pick her brain. And so when Ralph talked about, these things are generational wealth, that's what I have. I got a vault, man. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at. So I want to turn it over to Amy. And I guess I'll toss it over to you, Amy, with this question, if you will. If someone watching this show tonight had 3 legal documents to fill out, or, where should they prioritize? In what areas? And then I'll just let you take it over.
Again, it is one of the things I always think about is, unfortunately, people wait until we're desperate, right? That's, one of my favorite scriptures is, our people perish for the lack of knowledge, and without vision our people perish. So what we know is, if we are thoughtful, not waiting until we're in a caregiver capacity or need. Because I think about not just the person we're caring for, but I'm very mindful about the people who are giving the care, right? And we can talk about the statistics of those people who are giving care, how their life is impacted emotionally, physically, and they don't often live very long after the people they care for, if they live beyond the life of the people that they care for transition. But you asked me about what are the 3 documents. Now, and the first and foremost is that we should have, not when we're at the point where we're in despair, but when we become adults, right? Let's be responsible as adults, knowing the responsibilities that we should be planning for if, right? Because we don't know that when we're going to need that care. So the power of attorney for financial matters is a foundational document that we should have in place, right? That is, if we can't make decisions for ourselves, who do we trust to make that decision for us regarding our finances and our business? The second document that we should have is the Advanced Directive Living Will and Healthcare Proxy. So it's one thing to appoint a son or a daughter to act on our behalf, or a loved one to act on our behalf for healthcare decisions, but we should tell them what we want them to say. What I know is that so often people call my office and say that I'm not speaking to my brother or my sister again because they killed my mom by stopping life-sustaining treatment. We don't take responsibility for ourselves, and therefore when we throw it on somebody else, the consequences tends to be significant, right? Because, you know, someone who is, I'm not going to pick on you, Gary, but you in Florida and your sister's in Maryland and making decisions, and it's easy from a distance to say, nah, you can do this, you're all right, right? And so what I encourage us to think about is take responsibility for ourselves when we are healthy. When we are healthy, so that we're not at a space when we're operating on people's guilt. Because, you know, I know people who have, again, I tell people I'm a professional pessimist, because my world is based on when people call me, not because things are the best ever. People don't often, I mean, I get a few calls when people win the lottery and they're trying to hide it. But more often than not, it's when people's lives are falling apart and they're devastated. That's when they call us. And so my world, my stories are based on those statistics. So I'm trying to support people to not wait until that time, not wait until we can't make a decision and we're guessing what mom or dad or aunt or uncle would have wanted. So if I can create for the people who love me what my best case scenario is. Now I've realized just recently, and we keep that up to date, because recently, after having an uncle passed away who needed substantial support and caregiving, because he had he was cognitively brilliant, cognitively there, but his body required so much care, and his wife was providing that care. I know with a couple of aunts and uncles, that I made the decision and change in my healthcare proxy that I would want to be not at home. I don't want my spouse or my children caring for me in that way, because it's more than I should ask for. But if we wait until it's too late for me to make that decision, the guilt kicks in, and our spouse often thinks in health, sickness and health, and they feel like that's the responsibility that they need to have, because we haven't taken a responsibility and thoughtfulness. So it is painful in many ways, shapes, or form, but we've got to do the right thing by stepping up responsibly in our cases, first and foremost.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for the group to engage Amy based on that, and then we can go back to some specific questions. Mr. Spivey, do you have any questions for Amy? You're on mute.
I don't have any direct questions for Amy, but I will make an appointment to see Amy after listening to what she said. No, I went through a situation. Caregiving is very difficult, and it's even more difficult when you're a long ways away. And a lot of times people don't realize, but when you're a substantial distance away, caregiving can be a very expensive endeavor. My mother, after my father died in 1990, my mother was alone because I was an only child. And I put in for a transfer at the FBI to be transferred to the Norfolk office. My wife, who was working in federal court, put in for a transfer. And believe it or not, my transfer got denied. It was my mother, and hers got approved. So she ended up going down to Norfolk and living with my mother for a year. Consequently, out of 52 weeks, I went down 50 weeks out of 52. Luckily enough, I had a pilot's license, so I used to fly out on Friday night and go home and fly back again on Monday morning. I did that for 50 weeks. And renting a plane can be quite expensive. If I hadn't had a job that I was able to support that, I would have probably been broke. So caregiving can be very difficult. One thing I will say, that someone who is in that position, there is a National Institute of Aging that has a lot of information on caregiving, setting up financial with financial matters and things of that nature. So I'm quite familiar with having to care for a loved one from a distance.
Linda, you've done some extensive caregiving. Let me get you in here.
Oh, talking about the documents or just the caregiving in general?
Caregiving in general.
Well, my great aunt was the first person that I cared for, and I did a surprise visit to her and just to check on her, and found out that she needed help because she was eating butter. That was when I said, Aunt Esther, did you eat tonight? Oh, yes. I said, well, what did you eat? And she opened up the refrigerator. She had some butter. And that's what she was eating. So I knew right away she needed help. She was my great aunt, my grandmother's sister. So, and then I tried to help her with her checkbook. I realized that she didn't understand what was going on. And so I became the primary caregiver and trying to set things up for her, notifying the family, because nobody knew, because she was a very independent woman. She never married, had no children. So, and when she subsequently died, and I went through a lot of guilt about that. I even had to go to counseling for that because I wasn't up there, you know. So, but then also caring then after that for my grandmother's first cousin. Now she was great mentally, but she started deteriorating physically. But each time I ended up caring for somebody, I learned a little bit more. And when my mother had her stroke, September 15th, 2023, I realized I couldn't do it by myself. So my son helped, my sister, and then I got a professional caregiver to help. So I wasn't doing it by myself, even though I still kind of had that guilt. And I'm being the oldest child, I felt like I'm the one that had to make sure everything was going right and in my mother's best interest. And of course, we had our jokes when she called me Nurse Ratchet. She said, "You ain't no real nurse. You don't know what you're doing." And then she called me Nurse Ratchet. And then she said, "I don't know what I'd do without Nurse Ratchet." But and then my dad was with me and my husband. He died last year. He was 95, and he started deteriorating actually after my mother died, which is not unusual. Even though they'd been divorced for many, many years, they were close because they were high school sweethearts. And my dad started deteriorating. And one thing that helping my mother and then my dad, one thing I learned was to find joy in the things you have to do, taking care of people's personal needs. Because I had to take care of personal needs of both parents, and bathroom stuff, showering, helping them eat if they couldn't eat at a certain point. Neither of them could eat on their own, and I had to change my thought process to find joy. It was a joy. It was an honor, and it was a joy to be able to be there and interact with them despite their debilitations. And it was, I don't know, I'm not sure. Oh, well, my husband, I'm helping him. He's got a lot of health problems. And so I got into wound care. When my mother was ill, I had to do some wound care. So my great uncle was right. I am a good nurse, because I had to deal with all kinds of personal care, wound care, my husband had a colostomy. I take care of that for him as well as wound care. But I always, if I get tired, sad, resentful, I try to bring it back to, it is a joy and an honor to take care of somebody you love.
But I also don't want to have you overlook that you need to be able to be healthy too.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's on my list of what to do. It's important for self-care. I learned that by the time I started taking care of my mother, I learned about self-care. The prior times, no, 'cause I didn't. But starting with my mother, I learned self-care was very important.
Wow. Thank you. Before I get to the other, Amy, I want to come back to something you said, and I hope I understood it properly about planning and maybe not having people take care of you at home, maybe going to a facility outside, professional. What should families look for if they're going out to visit a facility? What should they be looking for?
There are two things that what we know is that people get better care when they have a better network, right? And so that's one of the things that I had a number of aunts and uncles, and we created systems where we visited random times so they never knew when we were coming, but we were always coming, right? And so having those impromptu random visits and checking out the quality of care, not just for your person, but for other people. Because if they're only going to care for your person when you're around, you don't know what it's going to look like when you're not, right? And so that was, we do all the reviews, we look at the evaluations that the state does. While we know that it's not necessarily always honest, but we reflective, but we need to do those stops and be comfortable with moving your person, right? Feel comfortable about it. That's not the place. They've shown you that while they gave a good front, this is the place to move from. Do that. But creating a space, when I heard, I think Eric was saying that, or Bill was saying that the distance was far away. That's so hard. Now, again, when we have the best is to create a network of support, so that even if it's not like with my aunt, we had my cousins, we had people lined up that we would visit. We created a social network that people would drop in at these different times, just to make sure. As long as when she was mentally competent, it was fine, and she was her own advocate. But when she was no longer able to be, we were there to make sure that her care was going to be consistent, because they didn't know when we were coming.
We've had relatives in facilities, and we used to do the same thing as nieces and nephews and sons and daughters. We would just pop in. And so the facility, they said, man, there's like 7 or 8 people. They're always here, at least at some point. And so they were always on top of their game. And I used to look at some of the other patients who had no one to come in. And that was kind of sad also, that no one, they had no visitors or no family members. That was also sad for me. Stan, what's your experience been? You got any questions?
This is something that I face on a daily basis, the family dynamics, and especially when it comes down to the finances and the ability to pay for this stuff. This is a very costly transition, and we all know, and Ms. Woodson did a fantastic job describing how, we're honoring those that, we're honoring our loved ones, or we're honoring, our elderly. We have to be mindful, though, that this is extremely devastating financially, especially, and I'm going to give tribute to Attorney Amy. She mentioned about being proactive and responsible. It's interesting how, as an insurance provider, people would have an accident and then they would call me while the cops are completing the investigative reporting. And they would ask, hey, do you provide auto insurance? And the answer is yes. And the question is, well, I'm currently in an accident. Can I get coverage? And that's kind of like what we deal with when it comes down to healthcare systems. Long-term care is a major, major issue. Currently, only about 3% of the population actually have a long-term care policy. So there's some nuances, and we can get into that. But the main thing is, just like Attorney Amy mentioned, be responsible, be an adult, make plans, because we know that most people don't fail to plan or don't plan to fail. They simply just fail to plan. And as an adult, that's the first thing that I recommend to clients. Make sure that you have the things that are going to be there. We know that 70% of the people are going to have some form of long-term care situation, whether it's a nursing home, whether it's a long-term care facility, whether it's dealing, at home, because we know 42 million adults are currently being treated at home by a family member or a loved one. So this is real. We know that this is going to be the case for the next 50 years, in my opinion, because the baby boomer generation, 10,000 adults are becoming age 65 every single day until year 2030. So we know that we're living longer. So those folks are going to live to almost 100 years old. So we're going to be dealing with this stuff for a very, very long time. So the main thing is be prepared. And I'm just going to put it's not a shameful plug, but I will say that, in the past, and most recently within the past 5 years, you once had an opportunity to purchase a standalone long-term care policy. So you have three options how to pay for this thing. You can self-pay, and the average person is going to pay between $300,000 to $500,000 for this care over that 2.5 to 3.7 year time period. Or you can have what we call a standalone long-term care plan, which is extremely expensive right now, and that cost continues to rise. Or third, you can do an alternative plan. You can include your long-term care rider with a life insurance program. So we'll get into the details of that, but those are things that I want to make sure that the listening audience and the viewing audience understands, that these are the types of things that you need to be prepared for. In addition to what Attorney Amy mentioned, having those durable power of attorneys, having those medical directives, making sure you have that will or trust, depending on what your, family dynamics, and depending on, what type of assets that you're looking at.
Okay. Hey, CJ, as the youngest person on this panel, how is this sitting with you? Where are you on this, having heard what you heard so far?
What do you mean? It's been great information. My only personal experience was being a home health aide and taking care of some older clients down in Florida, which was terrible. It was not a great experience. Very different from caring for somebody that you care about, somebody that is, not particularly kind to you, and you're not getting a great wage to change some racist guy's diaper, and to be talked down by their family, and to, do all that with Fox News blaring in the background all day. So that was pretty much my only experience being, somewhat of a caretaker, and it was one of the many awful jobs I've had over the years. But outside of that, like I said, it's just been, you know, great information to have in terms of like the wealth stuff. Like I play guitar for a living. I don't have any, wealth to speak of. So those things aren't something a lot of people in my generation can really think about, like life insurance policies, when I'm thinking about, do I have enough money to pay my rent and eat food? So that's pretty much like the main concern of the long-term planning is not something I feel like a lot of people have the luxury of who are in my tax bracket.
Okay. Ralph, what stories are you
But let me,
hearing?
can I,
'Cause
can I,
oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
so,
please.
I hear CJ, and the reality is that's the story for most people. And unfortunately, I say to people, what we know is that life insurance premium is based with the rider is based upon your age and your health. And ideally, if we could get it when we're CJ's age, right? I try to have with many of my clients when with their trust, I have them get their life insurance policies on their grandchildren, ideally, in that first 6 months of their birth, because that's the cheapest it's gonna be. But CJ, it's real talking about he got focused on survival. That's a luxury. But what we know is that we need to be thinking about how do we position our children to not just know that, again, how do we identify what survival looks like and investment in our future? How do we position them to have what they need to not just survive but thrive?
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask Ralph, from your perspective with your company, Dear Family Stories, what do you see? What teachable moments can you share that people need to know?
Well, I lost my mother when I was 24. She was 55, and then she passed pretty quickly from cancer. So basically, what Amy is saying, I wish I was the youngest. So I was kind of too young to even understand what was going on with my mother, let alone any kind of paperwork. But the problem in my family wasn't so much financial; it was material things that wasn't willed to anyone. So, and because of that, there was, a little bit of inner turmoil and fighting in my family. But I do realize my accountant is now doing estate planning, and I've kind of been hemming and hawing about getting it done. But this is definitely a wake up call about what needs to be done, and for the purpose of my daughter, my wife, and making sure that things are taken care of properly, because it can get very confusing after the fact.
Okay. Eric, and then I'll go to Carlos.
So I want to just say that given I'm in the process right now of having my trust updated, this is extremely informative to me. And Amy said something that's really stuck with me, and that's regarding, take home, in-home care and not putting a burden on my wife where that exceeds her capacity. Right. And so we're going to have those discussions, and I'm going to make certain I have some language in there. But I want to just share a very brief story because Amy talked about documents, Stan talked about the long-term care policy. In 2023, that was the toughest year of my life. My son was murdered in another country, in Chile. And later that year, in November, my dad, he died of myelofibrosis, which is a rare form of blood cancer. But it's the tale of two cities. In my son's case, he went to Chile expecting to come back to New York. He never made it back. Just prior to him leaving, he had all of his trust stuff done. I got all of his stuff done. The only problem was he didn't have it signed. So it never went into effect, right? So I ended up having to go through probate with my son, hiring a lawyer, spending several $1,000s to go through the probate. And that is a much more arduous process on top of the emotional anguish that I was experiencing over losing my son to murder. Now contrast that with my dad. Later on in the year, 10 plus years prior to my dad passing away, I convinced him to get a trust done. He did that. And under the umbrella of that trust was his will, his living will, the power of attorney, the advance directive, and the part in there that talks about the revocable trust stuff that tells you how you're going to split up your assets. What that did, that made the process so much easier, right? No disputes with my brothers and sisters because we had in black and white what it is my dad's wishes were. And as I told them as the co-trustee, I'm here to execute dad's wishes because this is what he wants us to do. So I think it helps to minimize any infighting, particularly when you have it in writing. It's not to guarantee that you're not going to have some disputes, but I think it helps to minimize those disputes. The other thing, as my dad was beginning to deteriorate and had to go into hospice, I had to consult with some attorneys, right? Because I was trying to protect his assets, right? Because absent me doing that, we were going to be spending $10,000 a month in a nursing home facility, an assisted living facility on average, $8,000 a month. Well, needless to say, that can really eat into whatever nest egg that you have if you're in there for a significant amount of time. And Stan touched on one of the things that I did like years ago, decades ago, and that was to sign up for a long-term care policy. And I recall getting weary of paying the premiums. But then I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, and that article said that long-term care insurance should be an integral part of your investment plan. Because if you want to save your nest egg and help preserve it, that needs to be a key part of your plan. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Carlos, let's let you weigh in.
Wow, a lot to talk about. I mean, working in financial services during the day, I see a lot of people who come into the where I work at, and let's just say the people who are extremely prepared, who say they have their wills and their trust and all their documents, it seems like they won't die. It seems like they're 95 and they're still coming in, cashing a $10 check. They are, and then I'm like, wow. And then it breaks my heart to see people come in and say, yeah, my mom or my dad or my aunt, they died, they were 54 or they were 64. And it breaks my heart. And one day I had a customer, this was a few years ago, so I haven't seen him, but hopefully he's still doing well. He was in his 80s. And I said, hey, I went to the University of Maryland. He went to the University of Maryland. He tells me these old stories about how he played lacrosse against Jim Brown and all this good stuff. And I said, hey, Mr. Maryland is what I called him. I said, hey, why do you think that people who are prepared seem to live so much longer? And it seemed, this is just from my experience, but and the people who aren't prepared don't seem to live that long at all. And he said, Carlos, it's a simple answer. You pretty much just answered your own question. I said, what do you mean? He said, think about it. The people who are prepared, they live much longer because they do a lot of the little things. They think about everything they do. Yeah, they think about doing a will, and they think about doing a trust, and they think about, the future, and they think about driving 55 instead of 95 on the highway, and they cross at the crosswalk. They don't cross in the middle of the street. He said, it's the little things in life that make you live a long time. And I was like, wow. And I said, that's pretty deep. And I think I can't find any logic to this day that overweighs what overturns what Mr. Merlin told me that day. And through my own experience, I think that before a certain point in your life comes, yes, you have to be proactive. If you're not proactive, it's going to be tough. Because when the time comes, then you're in a situation where you're depending on others, okay, if you can't take care of yourself. And it seems like a lot of people, when it comes to taking care of relatives or others, some are all in and are there consistently 2-3 times a week. Then there are other family members and friends who you still can't, they see the person less now than when they were healthy. Okay, there are very few people who check in every Saturday night at 6 p.m. So, Mr. Spivey, I commend you for what you did for your parent flying down there every 50 out of 52 weeks, because it's just not that way. I know for myself, I live in the DC area now, but at one point I lived in the Baltimore area, had an aunt who lived in a 4th floor apartment building in DC with no elevator. She never got married, never had children. She was retired. She was still going out shopping, buying furniture, and living her life. Needed a double knee replacement, and she knew it. And she was like, "Nah, I'll be okay." One day she fell, and she literally could not get up. She was not allowed to return to her apartment because she would have been trapped. Mind still sharp, but body not sharp. And yes, I had to take the initiative to drive from Baltimore once a week to take care of my aunt in Washington, D.C., when I had a relative who lived 10 minutes away who just wouldn't show up at all. So sometimes people are all in, sometimes people aren't all in. Does it make anybody a bad person? No. But I think the moral of the story is be proactive. Also, you're probably going to have tough discussions with the people you love, because if you don't, yes, they have a right to be 90 years old and jump out of an airplane if they want, but it might not be the best idea. And then what we heard earlier of the after effects. Usually people who go the extra mile to take care of loved ones, usually their health deteriorates. I have a buddy right now who, obviously we keep that private on the names and things, but who health has significantly declined since caring for family members. And I think we just have to think about those 3 stages as we get older: the before, the during, and the after. And if we, like Mr. Maryland said, if we just think about things a little bit more and keep an open mind to things a little bit more, then maybe we will live a little bit more. So that's my take.
Okay. I'm I'm listening to
Can I just
everyone and I'm
jump in?
thinking,
Can I
yeah,
just
go ahead, Amy.
one thing is listening to Carlos, and one of the things that we need to do is I like the fact that while we're seeing, and I hear too often that people aren't doing, but no, we need to hold people accountable. That we can't be nice and say, okay, well, let them live their life. No, we need to create systems of accountability, know what's going on, and say if you're not going to show up, have the checks and balances in place. And so often, I live in the Maryland, D.C. area as well, and so I have a lot of primarily women who are older and are alone with no spouse or children, and so we create accountability systems because. And I will tell you that the trauma that I experienced when one of our clients died, and they didn't know for weeks until they found her body, and so that's when I was mindful of, okay, no, what are the 3-point systems that we have to check in so that we know when things are not okay. Right. There need to be triggers. We are our brothers and sisters keepers. So we need to stand on that. And when the conversations are hard, it's hard. So what? We're adults. We got to have those hard conversations.
This kind of leads me to what I was going to say. This is such a huge topic. I don't want to give a short shrift. We may have to have a part 2 on this show. But I want to go around and ask each one of you to comment on this. For people who are watching, if our audience remembers only one thing from tonight's discussion, what do you hope they remember? Eric, what do you hope they remember?
I hope that they remember to be proactive and do not wait till the last minute. Now, I recognize that sometimes you don't have the luxury of having to be proactive. And when I say that, a tragedy or something may occur, and this is now at your doorstep, and you have to deal with it. But generally speaking, that is not the case. Let's get ahead of the game, right? And by getting ahead of the game, I think that you would be much more. When I say getting ahead of the game, get your documents in order, right? To facilitate what it is you want your legacy to be and to carry out your desired wishes, not the wishes of your loved ones.
Okay, thank you. Linda, if our audience remembers only one thing from tonight's discussion, what do you hope it is?
Well, only one, huh?
Well, if you got 2, you're Linda. You can do 2. All the people you cared for, come on.
Well, like Amy brought up, with all the caregiving I've done, and I think it was Carlos who mentioned knowing somebody who their health wasn't well after they were caring for somebody else. And I will admit, my health was compromised for a minute until I checked myself and took the time to take care of me first. Put my own, what do they say? Put your oxygen mask on first. So taking care of you is primary. But then, as Eric mentioned, you've got to know about all the documents that you need and the planning that you need, because I did not do that as well as I did. The people that I cared for prior to my parents, I was not well prepared with the documents and everything. But of course, I learned as I went along. But if I could share one thing, there was some confusion. My mother had a trust, and so everything was under the trust. So I thought, until I got a check for $3,300 refund for homeowners insurance when we sold her house, and it was made out to her. And I said, well, can you make it out to me as the executor of the trust? No, we can make it out to her or to her estate. Well, the trust and the estate are 2 different things. They don't consider it the same thing. So even though I had the trust, I still had to go and file for probate, and I think Eric said, or somebody said, that was like $3,300 to file for probate, because and because I couldn't open up an estate account at the bank without that probate number. And so to make a long story short, I was finally able to deposit that check into her estate account at the bank once I was able to get the probate. So the trust doesn't take care of everything, and I learned that the hard way.
Okay.
I don't know if
Wow.
anybody else has experienced that.
Wow. Thank you. Mr. Spivey, one thing.
One thing I would tell people is that if you're caring for someone and they have documents in place, go through those documents and check those documents. I'll briefly tell you, and my wife is going to probably kill me, but my wife's father was quite a, how do I want to put it, an entrepreneur. And when he died, he had 9 houses, and all of them were paid for with no mortgage. My wife had 2 other siblings, but they were away, and it's a long story, but he had divorced their mother years earlier and remarried, and so they didn't have a whole lot to do with him. Well, to make a long story short, he left everything to my wife. And when she went down to the court, what she found was he had an irrevocable trust that had been set up 15 years earlier. And it ended up that even though the will left everything to her, she ended up having to have 7 people involved in each one of those houses. So you need to go through things like that. She ended up being the executor of the trust, but every time a house was sold, everything had to be split 7 ways. So the only thing I would tell people is, if you are taking care of someone and they have documents, go through those documents so you don't be surprised.
Okay. Thank you. Ralph,
Yes.
one thing you think people should take away,
Get your affairs in order. Get them in order, and don't wait. Based on everything that I'm hearing here, that I will not be waiting any longer.
Okay. Thank you. Stan?
All things. Number one, Ms. Linda mentioned it. If you have a family member or parent that passes away, try to keep that checking or savings account open for at least a year after they passed. That's something that we recommend to every family. Number two, we touched on it a little bit, vision. Though your situation may not be ideal, I want you to think about, what would you like your life to look like? How would you like your family to live 30, 40, 50 years from now? And to be honest with you, a lot of people don't realize how inexpensive it is to set up a plan. We're talking upwards to $1 a day to set up a plan. And we talked about it. So have a larger vision for yourself. Most of the really, really wealthy families like the Rockefellers, the Kennedys, they don't use today's money to pay for today's expenses. They use today's investments to pay for today's expenses. So all the nest egg money is still sitting there, earning money on top of money on top of money. So you cannot look at your situation just for today. Look at it from a larger vision.
Okay. Thank you. Carlos, then CJ, and I'm going to let Amy have the last word.
Hey, I witness it every day. People love short-term plans. What are we doing today? What are we doing this week, next week? What am I doing on payday? Most people don't think long-term. You must have a long-term plan. If you don't have one, it's not only going to be tough on you, it's going to be tough on your loved ones, because they could suffer even more than you for not having a proper long-term plan. That's my take.
Okay. CJ.
Yeah, I'll just second be prepared and have a long-term plan if you have the resources to do so.
Okay. Amy, you got the floor, you got the mic, you can drop it, you can toss it, you do whatever you want.
One of my favorite scriptures is write the vision and make it plain to those who can see it can run with it. Right. And I like that scripture one because that means don't just tell somebody, write it out. Right. And there should be a vision that's greater than you, so that goes beyond your lifetime. So that's when we think about the holistic approach, when we have a vision that's not just about me, but it's about my family and my community. And so if I'm thinking about what I want for a long term, that incorporates what are the compromises, the sacrifices I need to make, the investments that I need to make to be able to achieve that which I want for my community. And so when I think about the care that I want, I don't want to sacrifice what my children and grandchildren would receive for my hanging on. So we get to think about what does that look like and how do we prepare for it. When I write the vision, make it plain, it's planning for the investments that I want to make for our children and our children's children. But it also is caring for, planning for the future, not when I am debilitated, but when I am healthy. And so I want to hold on to that. But also when we write the vision, we should revisit the vision. So that one of the things that we do in our firm is planiversary calls. Every year we retouch base to renew, to think about, because what I would have wanted at 40 isn't the same thing that I would have wanted at 60 or as an 80. So that progression and thought and consideration, what that looks like, and so that we can build out what we're doing. And so one of the things that Mr. Spivey said, that how his wife was misled to believe that the plan was one thing, right? And so taking the plan to be reviewed so that someone can truly stand and support what happens. And so we're not blindsided ever, so that we are prepared and to be in position to make sure that our children and our children's children have all of that which we want for them. So that, again, and there's safety in a multitude of counsel. So it's not just that I can make a decision for me, but if I can pull other professionals in so that we have collective guidance to make sure that we have what we need in place.
Wow. You know, my mind is buffering. This is a great show. And, you know, we may have to have a follow-up. Tonight, we talked about caregiving, legal planning, family relationships, preserving generational wealth, however you define that. But if there's one message that I heard that came through consistently tonight, don't wait for a crisis. Get your ass moving. Don't wait, okay? The greatest gift that we can give the people we love is the peace of mind that comes from being prepared. And as I listened to Linda, all the caregiving that you did, caregiving, when you said joy, you know, it made me think caregiving, depending on your frame of mind, yeah, that could be life's greatest expression of love and commitment. You know, you found joy in that, but you also had to find yourself and do what was in your best interest. And so families need to have, as all of us said in some form or another, honest conversations. We need to have thoughtful planning. We need to have legal protection. We need to review it periodically, as Amy said. And we need the courage to prepare for a crisis before it arrives. So if tonight's discussion encourages even one family or viewer to begin that conversation, we've accomplished our mission tonight, because we're going to help protect legacies, and we're going to help people have better lives for their loved ones. So I want to thank every one of you for joining us this evening. And just keep in mind that the greatest gift we can leave our loved one is not to be uncertain, but to be prepared and have succession planning. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. I'm Gary Johnson for the Thought Brothers. You'll see this show on our flagship website, blackmeninamerica.com, and all of our social media platforms. I'll make sure that you have the link so you can put it on your social media platforms. It'll be on our YouTube channel, the Thought Brothers website, and TikTok. I finally got with the TikTok because I found out that's where a lot of it's happening. You got to go where the people are and meet them where they are. So again, I'm Gary Johnson. Thank you all for being with us tonight. And on behalf of the Thought Brothers, We are out of here. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Shake it up, shake it up, get it right. Shake it up tonight. He's not pleased, he's calling us here. That tremble in the ground means his return is near. Families weeping under the dust. Homes built on pride and kingdoms built on lust. Children of promise, land in his hand. You can't keep pressing what you don't understand. Every wrong deed, every crooked plan leaves a mark in the earth, leaves a mark on man. He sees the land, he sees the line, he sees the crossing every single time. And when enough is enough, when the mercy grows thin, the shaking starts speaking. Shake it up, 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 get it right. Shake it up tonight. He's not pleased, he's calling us here. That tremble in the ground means his return is near. If the sky goes dark and the walls come down, still call on mercy. When the judgment sounds, let the proud fall low, let the broken rise. Before it all crumbles, open up your eyes. Shake it up, get it right. Shake it up tonight. He's not pleased, he's calling us here. That tremble in the ground means his return is near.